Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Aligned as Fuck podcast. This is everything leadership alignment, human design, and a whole lot of rabbit hole diving. As you know, we are going to get raw, real, and gritty, and I guarantee we're going to get raw, real, and gritty as I welcome my guest today. Before I introduce you to the amazing Jen Coken, let me just tell you, buckle up because this is going to get off script, unfiltered, and just we're going to let it fly. And so with that, let me just say hello and welcome Jen to the show. Jen.
Thank you for having me, Candy. I'm ready to be aligned as fuck.
Yeah, let's do it, right? Oh, love that. I love that we're coming out already with the punch. So
Please.
before we jump in and do what we do, which is just jump down whatever rabbit hole slide wants to take us, wherever it wants to take us, let me tell you a little bit about my amazing, badass, just like soul sister. I know I've had a lot of soul sisters on the show lately, and there's a reason for that. I think we need to amplify leadership voices, especially women's. And so I really want you to be able to see some of these people that I am so blessed to surround myself with. And Jen is one of those humans that I have known for a really long time. I don't know if we've ever fully figured out how or where we met, but it's been a while. And we finally last fall got to meet in person, and it was like a coming home because as you'll see, we just have some energy that likes to play together. That being said,
But also I'm 5'10" and you're 5 foot.
oh my God, she was so much taller than what I expected.
That was a funny part because I thought you were tall and you're like, I thought you were short. When can you tell sitting behind a Zoom
Exactly. And I
screen?
mean, I know a lot of people are shocked when they meet me in person because I'm 5'2", pint size. Like
Right. Pocket
Jen's
pal.
like 5'10" and just takes up this space and like is just this beacon of light. And it was like somewhere I think we thought we were sort of like here. And
Yeah.
it was so
Yeah.
funny. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that
That
was
was
awesome.
very funny. Yeah.
So, featured on ABC, MS, NBC, and TEDx, Jen is a globally recognized executive leadership coach, speech speaker, and best-selling author with 25 years of experience helping leaders thrive in high-pressure environments, known for her no-nonsense, I love her, no-nonsense coaching style, sharp humor. She has guided nearly 10,000 leaders, including Fortune 1000 executives, to break barriers and lead with confidence. A sought after keynote speaker, Jen specializes in executive presence, leadership influence, and overcoming imposter syndrome. Her book, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, that just hit the shelves and is doing amazingly well, no surprise there. Her book, Make Imposter Syndrome Your Superpower, provides women in STEM with actionable strategies to transform self-doubt into a leadership asset. Through her keynotes, workshops, and coaching, Jen equips senior executives with tools to command authority, inspire change, and create lasting impact. Her mission to empower leaders to shatter glass ceilings and leave a legacy of bold, authentic leadership. I just love that. So let's start with that. Let's talk about bold, authentic leadership. I think I know you, so I know what that means and how that resonates. I also think some of those words can be a bit of buzzwords that people sort of hang their hat on. So when you talk about bold, authentic leadership, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, it's such a good question because this is the thing that kills me. If you Google how to be authentic leader, there's something like 33 million hits, which tells me people are searching outside themselves to figure out how to be true to themselves. Because the authenticity for me is bottom line being true to yourself. If you look at the first four letters of the word authentic or authority or author, those first four letters are the Greek word, AUTH is the Greek word meaning self.
Mm.
And so when I work with my clients to lead with authority, it's never about power. And it's always about how do I lead like me? Because when we're authentic, when we're being true to ourselves, and when we've done the work to figure out who the self is that we're attempting to be true to, because I think the work you do, the work I do, speaks to that of how do we truly get all the mishigas, right? The crap between our ears out of the way to hear what we want, who we are, especially as women,
Yeah.
because we've been taught for so long to like fit in, please others, take a step back. So authenticity is doing that work so that you can be the author of your authentic journey. That's what authority is actually. And authenticity is what's true for me. And that can change from moment to moment to moment. And I think that's the other piece when I talk about being an authentic leader. There's no prescription and there's no formula, but being able to, in whatever moment you're in, to be direct with somebody in kind, or to take a step back and let someone else lead, whatever that is, as long as it fits and it feels right in your body, that's authenticity. Bold. Again, I always, I just launched a program back in March, and one of the lessons is called unearthing authentic power. And the thing I said to them is, notice I didn't use the word your. Or no, I said unearthing you. Sorry, I'm gonna flip that. Unearthing your authentic power, because it's true. Whatever's true for us. So boldness, same thing. Some who are introverted could go, well, wait a minute. I'm not going to wear loud clothes or have all the attention on me. No, 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 no. Boldness is you stepping outside your comfort zone, not letting your comfort, you get into that stretch zone. You don't want to go into the break zone, but getting into your stretch zone so that you're taking bold action consistent with who you truly are. And that's bold, authentic leadership for me.
Well, and I love that. And I want to break down a couple things in there because I can already see where some of the rabbit holes are going to open up. And one of them is around this idea of power. And so I love that you initially said, this isn't about helping people tap into power. It's about this authority. And I think there's a difference sometimes. And I also think power is one of those words that is very abused. And we actually live in a culture of force, not power, because
Yep.
power, in my opinion, similar to what you said in authority, power is not something outside of me. There is no such thing as power over. We live in an illusion that we've handed over our authority or our ability to stand in that boldness that you talk about. And so I'd love to explore that a little bit more with you as you work with women in STEM. And as someone who has a mechanical engineering degree, this is a happy, sweet spot for me. And I absolutely love the work you do in this space because more than any other industries, this is where this is really prevalent, I would say.
Yep. Yep.
How do you then help women step into that bold authority, that radical authenticity, and or inside the narrative of the power game they've been taught to play?
Such a good question. We could be on the call for hours, be on this podcast for hours. I think twofold. One is recognizing the construct within which they're operating as the construct, not to make it bad or wrong that we live in a patriarchy or that there is this hierarchy of power and there is this hierarchy of authority. I'm doing that in air quotes, right? But just recognize when you're a woman in a male dominated industry, there is a particular culture that's automatic. Doesn't have to mean that you've got to fit within it. Women often come to me and say, I feel like a square peg in a round hole. Now, a lot of coaches would probably say to them, be rounder.
Mm-hmm.
I actually ran into somebody who had an executive leadership coach. She worked in a bunch of finance bros, Wall Street, the whole thing. And the woman, female executive coaches coaching to her, which worked and got her elevated to the C-suite, was never stand up when a man enters the room. Don't reach out your hand to shake it. Don't speak up. Only speak when spoken to.
Okay, that just makes me want to throw up.
I know. And she got promoted until she realized she couldn't fucking stand it anymore and had to get the fuck out, right? And now she has her own consulting and coaching company. But my point in saying that is, number one, we want to be able to identify the construct as the construct, not as something we're reacting to. And then the second piece of that is owning who we are, having the authority, the power from within to identify. In the work that I do, number one, first piece is, where are all your limiting beliefs, and particularly imposter phenomenon? Because what I can always trace it back to is, for each one of us, we've had, I would say, 5 incidents over the course of our lifetime that are not dramatic, that are not traumatic, but moments that really shaped our brains at a very, very young age and makes us who we are today, unbeknownst to us. So we've had these moments where, we got ostracized at school, and every woman, every young girl has had that experience of being, I think boys just duke it out and women, for whatever reason, right? We're that experience, each one of us reacted to that in that moment in a particular way. Because when we experience, what, not even we, when the brain experiences an unwanted phenomenon and unwanted emotions, it is going to try to figure out how to avoid that in the future because it wants to keep the thing it's a brain of alive, which is you. So many of us might have been embarrassed in front of our families. Like, I have one client who we identified that her version of imposter phenomenon came from a moment when she was 11 and was at her cousin's house trying on clothes, and she picked up a pair of white pants, and her auntie said, "Oh, sweetie, those are too small. You're too big for those." Now, if that had been me, I would have put them down and done the moonwalk out of
Mhm.
there and been ashamed. Not her. She goes in the bedroom, puts them on. I'll show you, which then motivates her and drives her to start and sell two very, very successful companies. And we do this work to identify this brain pattern. We realize she's been living in this world of black and white. I can only be driven or, avoid embarrassment. Be driven, avoid embarrassment. So if I'm driven, at least I know that's my solution to avoid embarrassment, except embarrassment will continue to happen. And once we unlock that brain pattern, there's a whole world, like going from, black and white to Technicolor in The Wizard of Oz, a whole world that was available to her. And crazy story, the next day she went out and bought a pair of white jeans and did a whole photo shoot in them. Hadn't
That's
worn
awesome.
white jeans in 40 years.
Well, and think about it. There's the black and white side of that, right? But there's also the thing that says I have to be in constant proving mode, which is
Yes.
depleting my resources and
Yep.
burning me out on every level. And I mean, I do work in human design, and 63% of the population has an open ego, which means we've been conditioned in those stories to have to prove, especially as women,
Yep.
and we haven't fit that square peg in a round hole kind of situation. And God forbid if you had a point of view or an opinion, even as a kid, because this is bringing me back to something else you just said that I feel like we need to bust open a little bit, because I personally feel like this is a big source of where the imposter phenomenon and syndrome lives, is this dichotomy between nice and kind. They are
Mm.
two different energies. And I love that when you talked about authenticity and authority, you came back to the root Latin word of auth, which is self. When you look at the root word of nice, the Greek word, or the Latin word is necius, meaning ignorant, foolish, stupid, all of those things. And so I think about the conditioning then that goes around, don't elevate your voice, don't speak up against the
Don't stick
rule.
your neck out.
And you be nice. I mean, my mom and I had a conversation recently where she's like, "You're not being nice." I'm like, "The fuck, I'm not. I have zero desire or capacity. I'm one of the kindest people, and you know this, but I am kind with consequences. I am kind,
Right.
meaning I'm going to love myself first. But I'm curious, when you work, because a lot of the women you work with are powerful executives, and I know this because, again, some of this is my own story, and it's some of the clients I work with as well, especially in the STEM environment, which is a highly male dominant industries. And there's a lot of additional narratives, I would say, that go on in the STEM space, especially when women are in technology and engineering, and there's just a whole lot extra.
Yep.
How then do you help, or what's your approach, I guess, without putting the words in your mouth? What is your approach when you look at, wow, you see the connection of where that story of being nice is feeding that imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon? Where and how do you see the link, and how do you approach that?
Well, two things. One is I use the word imposter phenomenon because imposter syndrome doesn't exist.
Yep, agreed.
They named it a syndrome back in the day. It's great for SEO. I used it in the title of my book, but a syndrome can only be medically diagnosed. And phenomenon means it's phenomenological. It's an as lived experience. It's truly an amygdala hijack. And when we have an amygdala hijack, that reptilian part of our brain getting triggered by some instance of threat, and the reptilian part of our brain cannot distinguish between a knife at our throat or in a meeting being asked what we think,
Mhm.
right? So in that moment, we have to figure out how to rise to the occasion. So the work that I do a guided meditation when either in a group setting or even in my workshops, even on my keynotes, I do a quick 5 minute meditation and I have people recall the most recent time they experienced doubt or questioning themselves. Because for different people, it can show up different ways. It can be downplaying their achievements, it can be procrastination. It can, an avoidance. It can be trying to get things right, trying to get things right, trying to get everything right. It could be having a tendency to be nice instead of being direct. All that goes back to some moment in childhood. So I have them start to think about number one, I look at it from embodied leadership. When they recall that first moment, I have them think about where does that feel in your body? Are you tensing your legs? Do you feel a pressure in your chest or your throat? Are your hands sweaty? Because sometimes people can't recall details of a memory, but they can remember how it feels in their body, or they can remember the mood they had, or maybe they remember some of the thoughts they had. Once they have that in their mind's eye, kind of like someone's watching a scene in a movie, okay, now let's go to an earlier similar incident. Let's, time travel 10 years until we get back to sometime between the ages of 0 and 12. And then once they get that one, I have them open their eyes and write it down. And the first thing I do is once they've written down the whole story of what happened and why and who was at fault and who's to blame and, yada, 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 and Mercury's in the microwave again and, all the things and the planets aren't aligned, blah, 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 blah. And this is a tool I'll give everybody and a tool I give my clients all the time. Go back and circle just the facts.
Mhm.
Because when you circle those facts, there's only a couple. And in that moment, when you can separate feelings from facts and the stories you made up from the actual facts, you're present. And when you're present, you can have presence. Presence of what? Mind, body, soul, spirit. Mind to think clearly, soul to speak your truth, body to embody the kind of leader you want to be, and spirit to be able to spirit, God, Bob, your dog, I don't care. The ability to hear that still small voice within that is really the gentle nudges from the universe, which is truly the gentle nudges from your soul, which is really you anyway. But we have so much noise. So when I'm able to get back to that, they can then see that the times when they're triggered, they can only be nice or not,
Mhm.
because it goes between, you take it, you're nice, you're nice, you're nice, and then we erupt.
Yeah.
And where's that coming from? Because we're not really being true to ourselves and being kind and direct, because kindness, as we know, is clarity.
Mhm.
This didn't work for me. That didn't work for me. I appreciate, John, you reiterating the topic that I just brought up 30 minutes ago. And I'm glad so many people liked my idea. Thank you for bringing it back up after John presents it as his own in the same meeting,
Yeah.
kind of thing. So it's anchoring yourself in the present moment and recognizing when we're present, we have the ability to choose.
Mhm.
Once we've broken up that brain pattern, all of a sudden the car can go right and left and down the street and around the block. And then the big question is, the $1 million question I tell people is, how do you want to show up as a leader in this moment? In this moment, you want to give direct but kind feedback to somebody who has not been doing their job. You know
Mhm.
how hard it is to get somebody to give someone a performance improvement plan? It is insane to me.
It's crazy. Well, I call that sacred cows, right? I can't believe how many organizations, teams, and leaders have sacred cows because they are afraid to have I just had a conversation with a client this morning where she's like, I know I need to fire this person. She's like, well, we're going to wait till Friday. I'm like, you need to fire this person today. You've been saying this to me now for a week and a half.
Yeah.
Today. This is not, stop putting an extra layer of band-aids on it. That's the need to be nice. And she even said, I know, but it just, yes. And to your point, kindness is clarity, and kindness has very hard boundaries and expectations. And there are choice inside of that I think you're really alluding to. The other thing that I think is really powerful in that dynamic around, I mean, even as we're talking about kind of nice and kindness, is remembering that we always have choice, right? It's that space in between reacting to something in response. And it was interesting that when you were saying that, I'm reminded of there was an interview that Maya Angelou did with Oprah, one of the
Mm.
last interviews she did before she passed, and it was on Super Soul Sunday. And I remember it was one of those truth bombs that just kind of landed because I was watching it, and she said, because I'm a huge Maya Angelou fan, and she said, trauma is not the incident itself. Trauma is the ongoing retelling of the incident. And because as human beings, we are natural storytellers,
Yep.
every time we bring and we move into that story, we give it another layer. We add more color. We give it more energy so it gets bigger and bigger and
Yep.
bigger.
Yep.
While the incident, to your point, the facts can be horrific. The facts can be shitty and can be like, what the fuck just happened? And oh, and by the way, when you actually sit with the facts, sometimes you got to sit with the anger that's like, what the fuck? Like, why did I just bypass that and like get gaslight lit and like whatever it is that sometimes we got to deal with the anger that comes up when we stand in the truth of the
Yep.
fact.
Yep. Yep.
But it's the ongoing replay.
Retelling, because in that moment you're retelling, you're ingraining that brain pattern.
Yes. And you're giving it more juice and more energy. And to your point, it's pulling you out of that ability to be present and create presence, which when I look at the current condition of the world right now, it's one of the most pivotal, critical things missing is presence right now.
Yeah. Well, and actually fucking giving a shit about people.
Well, and leadership. I mean, we can go down lots of rabbit
Yeah.
holes
We'll
around that.
leave that aside. But yeah, I mean,
It's
it's
very
funny.
entitled. It's very much not a kind. And
Right. Right. But, so when I was 19, I was date raped, got pregnant, and had an abortion. That happened.
Mhm.
And I often share that with people, and people are like, wait a minute, did you just say that as if like pass me the toast?
Yeah.
Yes, because those are the facts. And as horrific as those were, all the shame and the shame spiraling and the blame of myself that I dealt with for like 15 years. After that, I was able to sort through it and get this is what happened. And there was a lot of stories I made up about myself and the world and and men and how unfair this whole thing was, right? What I discovered in doing that same kind of identifying that core brain pattern with my clients is when you separate fact from fiction and you just deal with the facts, you can also see that the brain made a decision in that moment to keep it alive, to keep the thing it's a brain of alive, right? And we're going back to nice or kind or kind of the drivenness between can I be nice? How do I be kind? And that like forward reverse kind of thing. And in that moment that that happened to me, what the decision I saw I took for myself was I'm fucked literally and physically,
Right.
like literally and figuratively in that moment, which then impacted how I related to men and led to drinking too much and using alcohol to numb myself and having, wine. It was years later when I actually chose, when I discovered this. This was now like probably, my God, this was 1999, and that happened 64, 74, and 85. So how about 14 years later? When I was able to discern that, I went, all right, well, I'm just going to quit drinking
Mhm.
and see how that feels, right? So for 11 years, I didn't drink because I could see there was something. This is before I identified the decision, something preventing me from wanting to be intimate. Like truly, I could be intimate physically, I could be, intellectually, but emotionally, like really giving all my heart was not available to me until I gave up alcohol. Now, fast forward, then, 11 years, I've then haven't had a drink. And I just chose to do it. One day I woke up, was on a 25-mile bike ride and said, you know what? I'm quitting drinking and smoking cold turkey today. And I did. So now fast forward 11 years later, and I figured out that the decision I took was I'm fucked. And then my life was about controlling everything, controlling how much I felt or didn't feel. And then I got to see the letting go, that giving up drinking was just as much of a control thing as it wasn't. And I was like, okay, well, what if I chose to drink? I had a glass of white wine, Candy, and I was wasted. My friends had to put me to bed,
Yeah.
but I could then choose and had to like go back to the drawing board of like a kid in high school, what works, what doesn't. And now it's really about choice. I can have a drink, not a drink, but I'm now emotionally available to my partner in a way that I hadn't been way back when. And during that time of sobriety, met and fell in love with a man I thought I was going to marry and moved across the country to Colorado. That didn't work out, but I then knew I had cracked through something. And that second moment of identifying the decision, I cracked through something else, so something else was available. So being able to identify and disrupt those brain patterns, those defining moments, I feel like is key to having authentic power, key to having authority, because you can see what's been running you distinct from the construct within which you're operating, distinct from, well, I could just blame it on the circumstances and, the guys here make me feel uncomfortable. Well, what is it within you that's allowing for that discomfort? And that is not to take away from, we need to change the construct too
Right.
and make it more welcoming, nurturing for women, because these days you do see more women getting the C-suite, but companies are hiring outside the company because they haven't built a bench and they haven't built a training pipeline. That
Well,
needs to
and
change.
I remember, and so first of all, I don't think, especially in this industry, in the environments that you and I tend to play, I don't think there are too many women that don't have similar stories on some level.
Right.
Think about the whole Me Too movement and when it came out, and there's a lot
Yep.
that went sideways on that. And the fact that I don't really think there's too many high performing women or anyone that's ever left their house that hasn't had some kind of experiences when, if they've, especially if they've played in these environments. So I think there's a piece of that, of one, just recognizing that you're not alone in this, that there is a
Yep.
construct that we have been conditioned to play in. And to
Yep.
your point, it's not that it's bad, wrong. It is. It is there is facts in the construct. And we have an opportunity to redefine that, reshape, redefine. I think that's a lot of the energy that's going on right now. Shit is imploding all over the place. Things are burning to the ground. They have to. That being said, a couple things that I think are really interesting, because one of the things, and I don't think we talk about this enough, because I know in my experience, you and I have a very similar story, and I did the same alcohol, and I cut out alcohol, but that extreme of all in, all out, black, white, that control.
Yep.
And what we don't realize is we're like, I don't drink anymore. And don't realize it's not a function of I don't want to drink anymore. It's a function of this is another way that I can control the situation or the perceived illusion that I have gotten locked in, because there is a big fundamental difference between I don't drink because I just don't feel the need to drink and I don't want to drink,
I don't feel like it. Yeah.
but not because I'm restricting myself because it was and I mean, I did everything but hardcore drugs, and I mean everything but hardcore drugs to take the edge off. And I mean, I think there was an article even when I first stepped away from corporate. I had an article on CNN that the very first line says Candy Barone has very little recollection of her late 20s. I'm like, oh, fuck, we went there. And it was because I worked my ass to the bone and dropped. And then I did everything to numb myself, from eating to sex to drinking to you name it, all to take the edge off and to somehow create this illusion that I was in control. That if
Yeah.
I could call the
Yep.
shots, that, oh, I could sleep with whoever and they could leave, or I could do this. And there was this power play that I bought into, that it was only to your point when I got sober enough, and I don't mean just not drinking, but sober enough to look in the mirror,
Yeah.
to say, what the fuck am I doing and why? And I
Yeah.
think that question there is, and I think this is going to be a perfect segue to talk a little bit about your book, but
Yep.
that why and how then that imposter phenomenon takes hold of us,
Yep.
instead of, and I love the brilliant title of your book, how it actually can be something that helps us access our superpower.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so the title of the book is Make Imposter Syndrome, because the SEO is higher, quite frankly, your superpower.
Mhm.
And I will never forget, there's a very well-known person who I won't name, who's well-known, around this topic. And I've been saying this for 10 years. that imposter syndrome is actually your superpower. And I remember I was on her email list for a little bit, and there was this email that said, the title was, "Some coaches will tell you imposter syndrome is your superpower. It's not." And I was like, whoa, I like cut it out, sent it to my marketing team. I was like, we're doing a good job. This is good because who am I compared to her? She's some New York Times best-selling author, right? So what I have found in doing the work with my clients, on myself, with others, and you were there in October when I led the workshop for the group that we were a part of, and we met through Michelle McGlade, I believe, years and years and years ago. I thought she introduced us. Do you know Michelle? It's not it. If you
No.
don't know Michelle, then that wasn't it. I don't know how we met.
Yeah, I don't either. It just feels like it's been like forever and it's been a long time. And
I know. I know.
There's just put us together.
Exactly. So when the amygdala is triggered from that threat response, this again is the reptilian part of your brain, the brain is automatically going to begin to figure out, how do I make sure that doesn't happen again? How do I make sure that doesn't happen again? To a T, every time I do this work, people come to the same conclusion for themselves about whatever their situation is. So I had a client who 9 years old, third grade, I think, comes home with a C on her report card, and her father is a very gruff military guy and says, "What's up with the C?" And oh my gosh, dad's gruff with me. First time, a little bit of fear, shame, disappointing, dad, who's the figure of authority. So as far as I can tell, it's your relationship to authority or it's your relationship to belonging. And she says to her dad, "But a C's average." And he says, "Give me 1,500 words on average." Well, in her little mind in that moment, what we realize, and again, when I take people through this meditation, I tell them, don't have it be logical what these moments are that you remember, because it's whatever you come back to. What she realized, she decided in that moment, is she's got to get it right to avoid getting yelled at by daddy again. She got straight A's. Well, she also was a COO of a major trade organization accountable for HR and finance. She better be getting it right. Except her standards for herself were incredibly high and she could never live up to them. So on one hand, it's your superpower. That's the car going in drive. It propels you forward. On the other hand, it also is to your detriment, because then all of a sudden you have these boundaries set up for yourself. For myself, mine happened when I was 6 years old, and I had a crush on this boy, in kindergarten, I guess it was, and we were on the recess playing. And I wanted to see if he liked me. So I went up to kiss him, and his response was, "Ew." Heartbroken at 6. And it felt like in that moment, every kid on the playground was watching me. And all of a sudden I could, like, in my little 6-year-old brain, all I could hear was ha, ha. And then this gross boy came up and said, "I'll kiss you," and then kissed me and ran away. A boy I thought was gross, right? So what did my little brain decide? I'm never going to get what I want, and I'm never going to put myself out there. So my career in politics for 25 years was getting other people elected, was bolstering nonprofits, starting nonprofits for others, to make a difference for others. It was never about me. And when I went into business for myself, it was such a eye-opening experience for me to be able to articulate the impact I make, because it was so counterintuitive to the 6-year-old girl who said, "Don't put yourself out there." It's kind of like Aussies say, "Don't be the tall poppy, because if you stick your neck out, it's going to be lopped off." But in fact, if people look at me, they're like, "You stick your neck out all over the place." Yes, for others.
Yep.
Again, when it comes to me, not so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Because I think this is interesting because you are, and anyone that knows you, you got a vibe, you got a personality, you got some energy, and most people wouldn't associate. Because I know somebody once said, I mentioned that my two biggest fears are karaoke, hate it, absolutely despise it. And I talk about this sometimes in open throat versus closed throat, defined throat in human design. I have a defined throat. I want to be invisible. And so people will say that all the time. I'm like, I do not like talking about myself. And my fears are karaoke, making a fool of myself on purpose, and introducing myself at a networking event. And people are like, "You're on stage all the time." I said, "Yes, but I'm a channel they're like, "You act out, you are like," yes. And it's because I have a message that needs to be conveyed, and I am purely the channel to bring the message to life. But the minute it's hey, Candy, what's your story? I'm like, can we take those cameras and those mics and go somewhere else? Because, and it's interesting because people that are in my world oftentimes go, I don't understand that. You love being on a microphone. When
Not about
I'm on
ourselves.
stage doing the work that is me as the channel, and then I can act. I don't care how crazy and stupid and foolish, I don't care because I'm
Nope.
in that space. But when it is the limelight coming down that says, Candy Barone. Like I joke, I'm like, I can be vulnerable professionally, but I still am learning how to let go of control and be vulnerable.
Personally. Yeah.
Because of that, the tallest poppy gets like, I just felt like I remember a coach saying once, she goes, you do realize you're entering. First, she said, I've never met anyone that's as high performing survival mode as you are. You're like the queen of survival. I'm like, resiliency is my superpower and my Achilles heel.
Right.
And she said, "You do realize you're entering a phase," and I had to really sit with it and learn how to trust that I was supported when she said, "You're out of the phase where somebody's going to come and cut you off at the knees." And I was like, I hear you say that. I know you see my hologram. I know you, and that's going to take some time for me. And that feels like for my imposter, so that's been the work that I've done, especially through the pandemic in the last 5 years or so.
Yeah.
It's really been, can I allow myself to be supported? And I know when you're talking about October, when we were there, I had one of those breakthrough moments that I could have killed Megan for crossing the room when I let it go and was like, holy crap, I don't know how to receive. I don't know how, or I haven't known, let's change that language, and letting myself trust that I have a safe space and a soft space to land. And I think
Yeah.
about how many of us have stories that are intertwined in this narrative that says, ooh, it's not safe for me to let you get close. It's not safe because I never, and to go back to what you said, I've never ever been, and it's why I love human design because now I can see it in my chart. I've always been a square peg trying to fit into a round hole and could never understood why people kept trying to want and put me in this hole when I'm like, first of all, I don't even want to be in that hole. Second of all, ouch.
Right. 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 Well, there's so many things that you said. Number one, you said resiliency is your superpower. My guess is that is born out of some incident when you were a little kid, that that's your flavor of imposter
100%.
phenomenon, right?
100%. 100%.
And the other thing I always tell my clients, make the hole square, round, square peg, round hole. Good. Square out the edges of the damn round hole. Don't try to fit yourself in. Don't try to whittle away
Okay.
yourself. But I think what you speak to, I think every single person I've ever met has some nuance of being afraid of people getting close to them in some way, shape, or form, whether that's a lover, whether that's a friend, whether that's a parent, whether that's even a child that's their own, of letting people get close to them. I think what you're talking about is the human condition,
Well,
you
there's
know?
juxtaposition, right? I really, 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 really want someone to see me. And oh my God, please don't anybody really, really. It's where
Yeah.
that imposter phenomenon comes from, right?
Yep. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we also share that, which is I'm an introverted extrovert. I can be out, you put me in the room of 10,000 people, 1,000 people, I have no problem. Put me in the room with my peers. And this is what happened. My meltdown on stage last October was I got triggered because the person I was co-facilitating with, when she was introduced, talked about one of her certifications, and I immediately went to, I don't have those. Oh my God! She said, da, 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 and we worked it out on stage. You were there. We worked it out on
It's
stage.
powerful too.
Yeah, and the thing that I'm saying that because imposter phenomenon never goes away. You just get better and better and better at catching it earlier and earlier and earlier. And that's the game. How quickly can you discern that in this moment you're reactivated and you don't even know you're reactivated because it's your form of imposter phenomenon or something similar? The quicker you can do that, the more you can return to presence. And that's what we're dealing with in society right now is reaction, 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 because it's only been 8 weeks with this current president and the amount of slashing and burning, and I say like napalm that he's been using on us is really incredible. And people are in constant high aware and high reaction phase. And I'm outside DC. So within my circle of friends, I was at book club last month and there was 5 of the 8 people were federal workers wondering if they were going to have a job. A guy that I work out with was at retirement age and chose early retirement to give someone else in his office who had a mortgage and a new kid a chance to keep their job. And then they let go of everybody in his office. So it's like real stuff, real
Well, and
time.
it
And I
makes me
think,
want to ask you a question because something just dropped in when you said that. And I know I have a belief around really imposter phenomenon only shows up for basically high performers, people that are putting themselves out on the edge anyway. And so something that, and I don't know if you agree or disagree with that. Um, so that I guess is the first question is, do you believe everyone has a level of imposter phenomenon, or is it really for those that sort of stand on the edge of their comfort zone? And if it's any aspect of that, something that just dropped in as I was hearing you say that was it's almost like I remember a coach saying to me once when I said I used to throw I still I'm on, you know how many we speak on a lot of stages, we're in front of a lot of, especially in front of my peers it's even worse, but I want to throw up, I want to throw up before these podcasts, I get
oh,
nervous.
yeah,
Spent
yeah.
30 minutes getting myself ready to have this and you're one of my dearest friends who I love, and like we've had the fucking like holy heart like called each other when we're hanging off the edge of our own cliffs, and like I could say anything to you and yet I still wanted to throw up. And I remember her saying, then the work you're doing matters. Like it's
Exactly.
almost as if we have and I don't know why, but that just makes like my energy kind of like my eyes, that it's like, ooh, hi imposter phenomenon, thank you for showing up because you're showing me I'm going off that cliff of what's comfortable, and you're giving me that ability to channel.
Yes.
It's a
Yes.
gift. In some
Yes.
ways it's a gift.
Yeah. So I have so much to say about this, but for just working backwards, you and I and anyone else who has that same nervousness before giving a presentation or speaking, we are doing that because we are up to something and the thing we're up to matters. And mostly, I know for me and for you, because my prayer since I was a little kid was, God, allow me to be an instrument of your peace. Allow me to speak true to your voice. I never know sometimes when I'm coaching people where things come from. You're probably the same way. I feel like it's divine guidance. So, number one, the up to that we're up to matters. So, we have something at stake. And yes, imposter, if that kicks in, like, okay, good. This is not bad that I'm nervous. It's actually telling me I'm playing on the skinny branches, which dovetails back to your first question. Everybody I've ever met, from 18-year-olds to 70-year-olds to food service workers to members of Congress, anybody I've ever met or coached has some version of imposter phenomenon at some point. And what I will say, and I'm going to say this twice, if you don't have it, you're not playing a big enough game. If you don't have imposter phenomenon, you are not playing big enough, because the reason the high performers have it is they're always constantly stretching and growing. And it's when we're on those skinny branches and those skinny edges and where it's really um, scary and debilitating in some ways and disconcerting, those are our growth moments.
Yeah.
Period. Full stop.
It makes me visualize when I used to, before my pre-Peyton and Ernie, when I used to do a little bit more riskier, like level 10, holy crap, I could literally, there were options where I signed waivers saying I could come home in a body bag, that my mom's like, I just figured there'd be a call. I used to love to go whitewater rafting in like class 5, like literally where there was only 2 inches, they would have closed the thing, all these things. And I went hiking with a friend outside of San Diego, and there's a rock called Potato Chip Rock. And literally it's 2,750 feet above, and it's a hard drop. But this rock is so thin. And we went out there twice because the first time we didn't get pictures. And I'm like, and there are ones where I literally have her arm because she wanted me to look over the edge. That when you go out there, it's so thin, the rock moves. And I'm like, I think about what you just said, because again, I say this a lot of times for people. If you're hitting every target every time, you're not growing big enough, because you
Yeah.
don't win when you succeed. You win when you push yourself past, to your point, that growth. But I just had this visual of, and I'll have to send it to you, but this visual of, I did a warrior pose up there. of potato chip rock, because it is that space where you can actually feel that if the wind picks up, that skinny little branch could snap at any time, yet there is a force pulling you
Yep.
because it's activating the very thing you were put on this earth. Because I think about it, I was just having a conversation with Kim Woods on our podcast episode before, and she's like, you chose to be here right now. And I said, I know there's a part of that that's so magically delicious. Don't get me wrong, we're all like, see the fine print in the soul contract, because the hell did I sign up for leading through this nonsense?
Right.
And it was funny because even a friend of mine with some things going on, she went, you realize that your whole life, all of those growth moments, all of those skinny branches, to your point, she goes, the accumulation has brought you to the fact that you were supposed to be leading through this shit show right now. And I wept. I wept. I actually was like, she goes, whoa, you got very much. I said, because I know that's true.
Yeah.
As much as there's a resistance sometimes to
You and
go,
me both. You and me both.
because I do want to see the soul contract. I want to know what,
I
like,
want to see the fine print.
oh my God, I love you. I love you so much.
I love you too. I love you too.
So
I can't believe
tell me,
our time is almost gone.
I
Like,
know that's so tell us how people can get your book, where
yes.
they can find you, how they can do this work with you.
Okay, so you can find me on my website, jencoken.com, JenCoken.com. You can buy the book wherever books are sold. My preference is you go to your local bookstore, you go to an indie bookstore, you go to Barnes and Noble, because we're working on getting more books stocked on the shelves at Barnes and Noble. If you're, global, you can't, there's no Barnes and Noble where you are, get it on Amazon, that's fine. And then the other thing I will say is if they go to
Hmm.
jencokenquiz.com, that will lead them to my imposter syndrome leadership decoder. And within 2 minutes, they can take this quiz and get a results page that has them better understand where they're low, medium, and high when it comes to some of these indicators of imposter phenomenon, with some strategies of how to deal with it. And they can always book a free call with me to go over their results as well.
Awesome. All of those will be in the show notes. So you will get links to all of that, plus her LinkedIn and everywhere she's at on socials, because Jen puts some really, really valuable content out there that
Thank you.
you, especially if this conversation is resonating with you, which I would guess if you have a pulse, this conversation resonated with you, you need to go out and check the work that Jen is doing. Jen, as we bring this to a close for today, because I have a feeling you'll be back. What's one thing you would love to leave people with based on the conversation we've had today?
I think recognizing that if you don't have imposter syndrome, you're not playing a big enough game, and understand that it's your superpower. And I think the other piece of it is just give yourself some grace and space, because we're living in a weird, messed up world right now. And the only thing we have control over is our ability to respond to any situation. So give ourselves and others grace and space. We don't know what the pressures of the world are.
Yeah, I love that. So much need for grace and space.
Yeah.
And while we always talk about it being something we need to put out, I think most of us really need to learn how to do that for ourselves, especially if you're a high
Yes.
performer,
Yes.
especially if you're dancing on the edges of what's not comfortable, because you know you're being called to lead in this new era and this revolution that's coming. And so, Jen, I just want to say just a deep, deep, deep sincere gratitude for not one, for you to be being in my life. I love you. I do know that I can pick up the phone and just say, fuck, can
Hmm.
you just hold space for me and let me, and vice versa. So I
Yep.
just, one, want to thank you for that. But two, because the work you're doing in this world is so necessary, and you show up authentically. You show
Mm.
up in your authority, and it's not always easy, and sometimes it's messy, and you show up in the messy anyway. And I love you for that. And I love the legacy that you're creating
Oh.
out of that. So thank you for being here.
Oh, you're so welcome. And thank you for having me on the show and being able to talk about together, like collaborate and co-create these amazing issues and topics that we covered. And I feel very thankful that our paths crossed and that you're in my life, because I do know you could call me or I could call you at any moment and be like, just talk me, because we've done it.
Yeah.
Talk me down off this
Talk me
ledge.
out.
And I love having you as a co-conspirator with me.
Yeah. Right? We need more co-conspirators.
And we need more
Tell them
co-conspirators.
the Care Bears, right? We need our Care
Yes,
Bears to line up. So with that,
exactly.
everybody, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Aligned as Fuck podcast. This is a human design experiment, and we are in an experiment right now. So keep tuning in. Lots more of these courageous, connected, raw, and gritty conversations. Just know we appreciate you. Make sure you subscribe, follow us, and we will catch you on the next episode. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.